Hello everyone, it's Michael Lazar here, and welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, we are going to be doing a Q&A. Now, I recently posted this Q&A in my community post, and I said if you have any questions, to please leave in the comment section of that post. So a lot of you did, and I'm going to answer those questions. If you have any other questions that I did not get to, or you have after watching this video, please leave it in the comment section down below, and then we can do another Q&A. So, to start, the first question is, I recently started reading in church, and I have a naturally deep voice, and I tend to read things at a lower pitch than I normally speak at. So, the question is, should he continue to read at this low pitch, or should he raise his pitch a little bit higher? Now, I'm of the perspective that it really depends on your acoustics and your environment. If your church is very reverberant, singing or speaking at a low pitch is very difficult to understand. I recommend, if you're in a very reverberant environment, to increase your pitch or raise the pitch a little bit higher. The other thing is, listen back. Maybe put a recording out there. Maybe like if the church is empty, read from the analogion and put your phone in the pews and see if you can understand the words. And try it at a lower pitch and a higher pitch and see at which pitch are the words more understandable. Because ultimately, that's what's more important. The next question is, do free chants normally resemble the hierologic style? And, I think we should redefine what free chanting is. Free chanting is kind of an oxymoron, because if you're chanting, you're following a style. So you're not really free. You're kind of enslaved to that style of music. With jazz, sure, you're free to improvise on that scale, but as long as you stick to that style. So the hierologic style is only one genre of Byzantine chant. I can improvise on hierologic, sticharic, and papadic, but it just depends on what I'm singing. So the Xastikon, you would improvise on the sticharic style, and it also depends on the speed and the genre of the other hymns I'm using. So if I'm going to do the praises in the sticharic genre, I would improvise them on the sticharic genre. If I'm going to improvise a cherubic hymn, I'll improvise it on the papadic genre. Next question is, who is your favorite Greek composer? So my favorite composer who writes in Greek is Dmitri Mor, of course, but of course he's not a Greek, he's Lebanese. So my favorite Greek composer, it's probably a tie between Phoka and Stanitsas. What I like about Phoka is that he uses classical form and sentence structure, but adds more chromaticism than the composers of the past did. And what I like about it is that it's familiar, it's comfortable, and it is well written, and it is to the form, but it does not hesitate to expand into other forms of chromaticism, and it does it really, really beautifully and masterfully. Stanitsas, what I like about him is that he does this, but to a more extreme level, with more difficult rhythms, and a lot more difficult and beautiful phrases. But he does it so perfectly. He does it in a way that is just so nice. Phoka is kind of like Schubert. He's kind of classical form and all that, but he adds more chromaticism. Not a lot, but enough. And then Stanitsas is like Liszt. He's using, the techniques he was given, but he does it in a virtuosic manner. And I think it's really, really interesting. The next question is, when to use chest voice and head voice? So head voice and chest voice is kind of like a spectrum. You don't just switch to head voice, you don't just switch to chest voice. You can emulate certain colors in your sound by changing where the resonance comes from, whether it's from your head or your chest. But for Byzantine chant, if you do end up switching to a lighter tone that you could call the head voice, you don't want to sing it like ma. You want to cover it a little bit. And covering means increasing the space vertically in your mouth, ma, while also kind of taking the place a little bit farther back. So if I sing like ma 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 ma, it's consistent with my chest voice. So although technically it might be the head voice, it creates a more consistent tone. The next question is, how do you sing like the monks or nuns in a monastery? So what is their technique? And how is it different than a church singer? So monks and nuns tend to sing with more closed mouths, although their voices are very resonant because they keep that space inside their mouth. The reason why it's a practice of humility and a virtue, you can read this, I believe, in St. Paisios' spiritual counsels. He talks about this monastic style of chant, and it's different than a church singer. A church singer needs to fill a church. If you sing with a closed mouth, you can't really fill a big space. But monastery churches are smaller. A lot of times they're built and carved into caves, and they're not as reverberant. So their style is more for humility and a spiritual practice, as opposed to practical singing in a church and filling it with space. But it still can sound beautiful because the monastics sing from the heart, and church chanters, myself included, I'm not innocent from this. A lot of times, there's a bit of ego in their chanting that definitely comes across sometimes, and it makes the music a bit more tainted. The next question is, how do you sing without fatigue? So 1, warm up before you sing. 2, you need to sing more often. So if you sing, once a week, only for an hour on Sundays, you need to start singing more often. And I always say do more vocal exercises throughout the week. And the other thing is pace yourself. So if you're singing a 3-hour long service, do not give everything your first hour. If you do that, the next 2 hours you won't have anything left. So your first hour, you should really focus on, not singing too loud and not singing too high, and really, really, working on not pushing. Make sure that you're relaxed and that by the second hour you feel comfortable. Second hour, maybe you can start raising the pitch a bit more. Maybe you can start saying things with a bit more energy. Third hour, give everything you have, kind of. Not everything, still have a little bit left in the tank. You don't want to finish a church service completely dead vocally. You want to be able to speak afterwards. Of course, there's social hour and everything. Do not push, do not scream, and pace yourself, and you should be good to go. How do you read like you're in a monastery? So, if you're in a monastery, the style of reading is not very loud. It's more contemplative and slow, and likes to take pauses at commas and periods. So if I take Psalm 50, have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy great mercy. If I sing have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy great mercy, it sounds very pharisaical. A little bit inappropriate for a monastery. For a church, if you're filling a church, you might be able to do that and get away with that. But if you're in a monastery, you want the more contemplative sound. Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy great mercy, and according to the abundance of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgression. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. If you read it in that style, that's how you get the monastery style. The next question is, how and what should a beginner focus on when learning Byzantine chant? 1, make sure that you can actually sing. You need to have a better sense of pitch. If you're tone deaf or have no musical background, that is something that will greatly hinder you and prevent you from even being able to learn Byzantine chant. So first things first, make sure that, if you're tone deaf, that you work on alleviating it and work on ear training. And 2, make sure that you learn the proper fundamentals of singing, like breathing, mouth opening, how to stand. And essentially, if you don't get these fundamentals right, you won't be able to actually implement them whenever you learn chant. The next thing is, where should you look at in regards to theory? I always say, start by learning knee to knee, of course, the diatonic scale. Then learn up 1, up 2, up 3, down 1, down 2, down 3. Of course, all the variations. Then learn timing, so adding timing. Then learn combination characters. Then learn a Gorgon. And then learn up 4, up 5, up 6, up 7. And then learn the Gorgon, Trigorgon. The reason why is because that's the order of, kind of how often things occur. And it's not really useful to learn the things that are seldom used really early on. You want to learn them as you use them, or as you approach them. So, it's better to learn it if you're learning like a 4-month course, you should learn the fundamentals within month 1 and month 2, and then month 3 and month 4, you learn the other things, just because it makes it a little bit easier and less overwhelming. The next question is, how do you practice each week's hymns? Now, I assume this is going to be like a Sunday Orthros or something like that, where the hymns change. If you're starting off, pick one or two pieces from Orthros, learn very, very well, and deliver it with music. The rest of them, if you have, a choir, or you have free chanting, as the previous comment said, or improvising, you can do that. But try to prepare at least one or two chants with music that you can perform well. That way you can start learning the music each week, little by little. You don't get overwhelmed by it, and you start to learn good practice habits. The next question is your top 5 chanters / choirs of all time, east or west. I think number one I have to give to my father, just because of all the influence I've gotten from him and the expertise and advice. You don't really get to have a protopselti at your fingertips, so I'm very thankful for that. The next chanter I like to put up there is Panagiotis Niacharidis. He's a modern chanter. He's the chanter for the ecumenical patriarch, Bartholomew. And whenever you listen to him, he's very consistent. I've never heard him ever sing something, or a recording of him that has ever come out that I've ever listened to and said, it could be a little bit better. He's very consistent, and he's very, very good. And I recommend listening to him if you want to get a very good sense of, classical Byzantine style and repertoire, in regards to also singing and attractions, as well as scales and intonation. The next chanter I like to listen to, I think Father Nicola Melik. He's an Arabic chanter. I met him about 2 weeks ago, and really, I love his recordings online, and he's a great composer. Not just that, but in person, his voice is even better than when his recordings are. Of course, that's with a lot of people, and just listening to him, you can tell it's very, very solid technique wise in regards to his ornaments and his style, and it also comes from the heart. He has a very good sense of hyphos. So that's 3. Now we have 2 more. Let's look at some choirs. I like the choral works from the Hamatura monastery that come out. I think they have a YouTube channel, and they're always really nice to listen to because it's very raw. And when I say raw, I mean it's not edited. It's not looked out for post-production things. It's the monks chanting, and it has a very, very certain feel to it that's very calming and peaceful. We went to Hamatura again almost 2 weeks ago, a little less than 2 weeks ago. They gave us some nice CDs to listen to, and just listening to them, they don't have tons of layering on them. Sure, of course they have production, because it's a CD. You have to have some form of production and microphone set up to record it, but it still has that same purity to it that you get from the recordings online. And I think the last chanter / choir I really appreciate, I think I like the Kyuku Monastery a lot. I think what I like about it is it's a really interesting way of preserving the 2 choir tradition of a left choir and a right choir. And the thing is that, of course, most of the things they post are live streams. On a church Sunday, you have a lot of variables that happen. It's never really consistent all the time in regards to what you get. You might get a different person in the left-sided choir because one person is substituted, or you get a different group of people on the right side because sometimes you switch around and stuff like that. But what I like is that you get to hear the tradition of a 2-sided choir that's done very well. So the Kyuku Monastery choir I really think is a good choir to listen to. Now, we have last 2 questions. The first one is, what chanters inform your hyphos? A couple chanters. My father foremost. I think that's probably the biggest influence. I think Panagiotis Niacharidis, again, I like his way he interprets attractions. I think it's very well done. But my actual vocal technique and style I learned from almost a decade of classical singing, probably a decade now, an operatic style. Those are things that you learn, not from Byzantine chanters. You learn from Western musicians, and you should not learn Byzantine, Western theory on singing from a Byzantine chanter. unless they actually studied it, of course. You should learn vocal technique from, I think, the best. And I think, honestly, the best vocalists with some of the hardest repertoire out there tend to be from, the Western Common Practice period. Is all music applicable to that style? Absolutely not. Arabic folk music has a different sense of vibrato and ornamentation, has a different sense of intonation, but the breathing and those fundamentals are basically the same. And I think the Western style does a very good job of teaching you that control. The final question is, what are some tips for mastering scales? One, listening to a lot of good chanters and choirs that use correct intonation. The issue is that there's a lot of music out there that it's not good. I always say, Greek and Arabic music tends to be pretty well done and consistent. The other thing is you want to make sure you understand the actual theory of what's going behind the scales. So like how things are derived in the scales, how to interpret Maria. And two, I like to say use a tuner and try to look at the tuner and try to figure out all the microtones. And I of course I can go in more depth about that. I can make a whole video about mastering the scales with a tuner, but the TLDR of that is basically, figure out where the pitches should be compared to the natural pitch, and figure out what it looks like on the tuner and how it sounds like and how it feels like, and use that to practice. So those are all the questions. If you have any more questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section down below. Again, it could be anything with music, Byzantine chant, vocal technique, even piano if you want. You could also put anything about like personal experience or anything like that. Of course, if there's some questions that you need like a priest to answer, don't just ask me a question about like the meaning of life or things like that. That's not that's not what we're looking for. But I hope you found this video helpful and interesting. If you did, I would greatly appreciate if you liked and subscribed. Other than that, I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.